Welcome to Guns 101, our video welcome message for new gun owners. It's brought to you by the Self-Defense Radio Network. I'm Rob Morris from Self-Defense Gun Stories. My partners are Amanda Suffolcool from Eye on the Target Radio and Paul Lathrop, the guy doing the heavy tech lifting. He's from the Polite Society podcast. Tonight, we have Tony Simon with us. You can find him at The Second Is For Everyone and diversityshoot.com. Tony, millions of people brought a gun home. They didn't have the chance to go take firearms classes because they're under quarantine. Talk to me about just the fundamentals of using a firearm and how do we manipulate it? What do we call the things we do with a gun, not only to shoot it, but to load it and then make it safe?
All right. I'll start with semi-automatic firearms and the magazine, which this is a magazine for a Glock handgun, but pretty much most magazines work this way. And you load the ammunition into the magazine by placing it on top and either pushing down and sliding the round back, and that loads a magazine. Again, pointy part goes forward and it loads into the magazine that way. Again, if you have the correct ammo, it should go into your magazine. Especially if the gun is new, it's going to be stiff. Just take your time, load the rounds in. Always leave your firearm unloaded until you're ready to pull the trigger. So fine to load the magazine, but until everything is set, do not put the mag into your firearm. All right, now for demonstration purposes, I have a stock to a high point firearm. The magazine would go into the handle and it inserts that way. Again, you don't do this until you're ready to shoot. Now, when we're talking about a firearm like a carbine or rifle or shotgun, which we call long guns, when you're talking about manipulating it, you have to learn how to load it. The fun thing about a long arm is it's easier to keep pointed in the safe direction because you're more aware of the muzzle because it's way down here. You always see it. A lot of times people get comfortable with a handgun and sometimes they're not aware where they're pointing this barrel on. And this is just a frame of an old black powder gun, but it's easier to turn around and point it at somebody. So again, when we went over the muzzle, you keep the muzzle pointed down range. You keep the rounds out of it until you're getting ready to shoot. That's the last thing you do. You load the rounds into it and you shoot it. You aim it down. Now, aiming. Bumpy things on top are called sights. You have a rear sight in the rear, front sight in the front. What you try to do when you aim is you look down the sights when you hold your firearm out. Usually you grip it something like this, like a firm handshake type grip. You aim and you make sure the front sight's in the middle and it's sitting on what you want to hit. The rear sight, you're looking at the front sight through the rear sight and they're even. The tops are even and the space between both sides of the front sight are even in your sight picture. It's much easier if you have a picture of this, but it's pretty much like lining your fingers up. A V is your rear sight, your front sight is your pointing finger. And you just put it on top of the target, focus on the pointing finger, make sure it's underneath your target. Now, pulling the trigger. A lot of people anticipate, they do some crazy things like jerk a trigger. I don't care what you call it, but you just want to steadily pull the trigger to the rear to make gun go boom without disturbing the sights. So when you aim it, you pull the trigger. I'm only doing this a couple of times because it can damage it. And the gun doesn't move. No flinching, no anything. The gun will go off. It knows what to do. You just take your time, pull the triggers. Mostly sights and trigger pull is basic firearms manipulation and firearms fundamentals. We go into it deeper in a class. But one of the best things and one of the best ways I found to practice pulling the trigger and not moving the gun is taking an empty shell casing and setting it on top of your firearm. And when you set it on top of your firearm and pull the trigger, it shouldn't fall off.
Well,
unless it does that.
And that sounds like a magician's trick. It's not.
It's not.
It takes practice. You can do it.
You can.
But
I think that. Okay, go ahead, Tony.
Oh, I think one of the great things about being able to what we call dry fire, which that is, it's actually no rounds in your firearm. It's putting the little empty case on the end, steady, pull the trigger. That is the least expensive way you can get a lot of great practice in the fundamentals of just pulling that trigger and not making the front sight move. And that's one of the hardest things I think everybody suffers through. I don't care how many thousands of rounds you fire. Sometimes you still find yourself flinching or anticipating pulling the trigger.
I think so. And I think that to tell new people to understand that when they go into whatever their shooting stance is, so they're now looking down the sights of the gun, they're going to notice that the gun does not hold still for them. And guess what? It doesn't hold still for anyone. And that is probably, to me, the biggest, the most well-kept secret. It's kind of like Santa Claus. It's that kind of a universal. Nobody tells you that. They don't tell you that because the earth is moving, because things are happening, that your gun is not going to hold still. So expect it. Expect it not to hold still. And then adjust for that by constantly trying to keep it on your target. What do you have to say to that?
That is one of those things that, and this is why I go to other people's classes, because I would not have thought about that until someone had brought it up in class. Like, why is everything moving? And I'm like, there's never a perfect sight picture. It moves around. So what you have to do is figure out where it moves the least, and when it crosses the target that you want to hit, and you squeeze the trigger when it's near there. Don't jerk the trigger. Don't try to catch it. Just understand the natural rhythm, and when it gets to where you want, pull the trigger, and you'll hit your target.
I tell everybody it's the Earth's rotation. That's why it's always moving. That way they have a scientific reason why it's not their fault.
Yep, it's the Coriolis effect, and I say El Nino personally, but that's just me.
Global warming. Great. Okay, let's wrap up.
Okay, so folks, we were getting the fundamentals from Tony Simon. The second is for everyone. Go to his website, diversityshoot.com, and you're gonna like what you see. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks for having me.